And we're live again from San Diego. Hi, everyone. We're showing the trailer again. Okay, so hi, everyone. You've joined another Massimo Consumer live stream with Phil and Cam, and Nick is in the background doing his usual magic stuff. I'm Frederick, joining you from hot and humid Hong Kong. How are you guys doing, and what exciting stuff are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, so actually, bring me up. What's up, everyone? It's Phil, and today we're going to be talking about a couple of new things, and two of them are actually sitting in front of me. These are the new Marantz AV20 and AMP20. So we couldn't tell you that when we were talking about Marantz separates, we're going to be talking about new Marantz separates, but we're also going to talk about the AV10, the AV20, the AMP10, and the AMP20, because we know that many people out there have lots and lots of questions. As you can see, Cam is missing because Cam is running down to get more parts so we can actually show you internals. So we just wanted to let you know that we're coming and that we're going to be talking about a lot of these products. So while we wait for Cam, let's talk a little bit about the two models that we just launched. And you can bring up the slide. The two models that we just launched are the AMP20 and the AV20. And of course, we encourage you, if you have any questions, to put them into the live chat. And I will try my best to actually answer those questions whenever I possibly can. We also have the ability to do things like show off the menu systems. And hopefully when Cam runs back up here with our box of toys, we can actually talk about those as well. So let's talk a little bit about this product. So the reason why we built this, and you can bring me back up. The reason why we built this is because I love the AV10 and I love the AMP10. I actually have a loaner sample in my home, but I really don't need that many channels of processing. My room is a 5.1.4, which is quite common. And we also do a lot of 7.1.4s. So there were people out there that were looking for the same build quality, the same amplifier quality, but they just didn't need as many channels of processing. And that's where these two units come in. They will be retailing in the US for about $6,000 a piece. So $6,000 for the amp and $6,000 for the preamp. And we're going to talk a little bit about why you would want to step up from something like a Cinema 30. But then we'll also talk about and show you the insides of these units. And you'll see that if you try to compare the build quality of these units to anything else that's on the market today, at this price point, you would be hard pressed to find the same level of performance. So, Frederick, anything you want to mention?
Yeah, everyone is basically asking what's the difference between the AV20 and the AV10. It's the number of processing channels. And then, of course, the AMP10 and the AMP20, rather, it's 16 versus 12 channels. So
exactly. So there is some channel counts, but there's also some other differences between the two models, which we will cover. So if you bring up the PIP slide of me and you'll see that. So these are kind of the two models that we actually have out there. And if you look at the two models, cosmetically, they look very, very similar. The width and height of the chassis is the same, but if I show you the 10 is actually a deeper chassis. But a lot of the functionality that you see, the build quality you see, are common across both models. We'll just call it the 10 series, if you don't mind. The AV10 series, or the separate 10 series, and the separate 20 series are both built in Shirakawa, Japan. So designed in Shirakawa, engineered in Shirakawa, and manufactured in Shirakawa. And that's something that makes them really good. And as I mentioned, if you look at the build quality of these units, it's really hard to really understand it if you just look at the exterior, the amount of detail and care that goes into this particular product. So that's one of the things that we want to kind of talk about as we go along. And I will show you some of the differences between these models as we come along. So Cam, you can have a seat, man. They're missing you. They need to see you. Okay. Yeah, have a seat. So I mentioned that. Look, guess who's running in right now? Ladies and gentlemen, Cam Valentine. So Cam actually went and got a couple of parts for me. I needed that, and I needed the HDAM. Oh. So Cam, why? Okay, we're still setting up, and can you tell them why we're still setting up? What were we doing today?
We were in Los Angeles hooking up a classroom with a little assistance to their. What was that classroom called? It was a sound production classroom to where they do their mixing of audio, and they wanted to do Dolby. So they currently had a setup to where they only had a 2-channel. So we brought over some Polk product and some Marantz products to help them out. So now they can do their sound mixing with full Dolby.
Yeah, Dolby Atmos.
Minus
the heights.
Minus the heights, because their ceiling was a little crazy and they couldn't do heights in there.
Yeah, so we were, and this is actually kind of an interesting thing. I have been to a couple of different big retailers, as well as professional classrooms and applications where people are actually utilizing things like these Marantz separates, actually as parts utilized in professional applications. So this one was they had a really, really nice set of PMC, like $20,000 monitors, but it was only 2-channel. So we brought them a Marantz multi-channel amplifier to drive the speakers, and then we had to figure out how to incorporate the Marantz power into this Pro Audio multi-channel interface. I will tell you that also the AMP20, the AV10 and the the AV10 and the AV20 are actually being utilized, and the 20 will be utilized as well for checking mixes in studios. A lot of times these studios will have a board, and those boards all have active speakers, and they can check the mix on utilizing the track that's on the computers. But sometimes they want to check the final mix off of a once it's been rendered and mastered for Blu-ray or something like that, and they're utilizing the AV10 and as the processor plugged into a 9.1.6 active Dolby Atmos professional system, so they can check the channel count. I've actually been to a couple of studios now, and the AV10 actually has higher channel counts than many of the studios that are actually used to mix the small Atmos theaters that are doing a lot of the mixes. Most of those studios are 714, and the receiver will do 916. The AV10 will do 916. So if you're a studio and you're looking to get, a lot of times it's more economical to actually use an AV10 or an AV20 as your processor to check those mixes in your Dolby Atmos theater. So we were doing that today. It was Compton High School. I was Centennial High School in Compton. And we just got back. Anybody would tell you who lives in California, driving from San Diego to Los Angeles, you might as well be driving from New York to Boston.
Yeah.
Right? So we just got back. And that's why Cam is all sweaty.
Yeah.
Because
I'm literally running around. I just ran from downstairs to up here to get this done. And so I just brought up one part. The case that has the rest of our parts is still downstairs, so I didn't even bring everything yet. So I was trying to okay, I need to bring the rest of these parts up here. So should I be running back out of the room to go grab the rest of the parts?
Yeah. So as I said, make sure you put your questions in the chat. So there's a couple. So we already talked about Arthur's already asking the difference, and we are actually going to cover that technical difference as we go along. The other one that someone brought up was, a release of a 7706 level product, and we understand that there's probably a need for that product as well. But if you think about it, right now we had the AV10, right, and the AV10 was a massive step up from the AV8805, and we had people that were looking for that replacement for an AV8805, and that's what the AV20 is. And of course, we're exploring that other option as well. The goal is to give you the proper amount of surround sound processing channels and capabilities for your application. And if you don't need as many channels, you don't have to use as many channels. So let's go look at some of the details of the AV20. So the AV20, if we look at it, so funny, the slides are tiny. Let me see so I can actually read what I'm looking at. So if you look at the parts of the AV20, it is a 13.4 channel product, right? Preamp, you have your balanced outputs, like all Marantz products. It is fully loaded with all of the surround sound formats. We are the only ones, or one of the only ones, that support Dolby Atmos, DTS:X Pro, Aural 3D, IMAX Enhance, all of that stuff. It has multiple HDMI inputs. The multiple HDMI inputs are one of the big upgrades from the AV8805. Plus, there's a lot more improvements to amplifiers, to preamp stages and things like that. You can see all the specs there: better graphic user interface, Odyssey, Dirac capability. And actually, speaking of Dirac, you can actually bring us back up. We also had a couple of other things happen this week.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Does it have Dirac active room treatment?
Cam? Yes, it does.
Oh, okay.
So what we're doing now is people have been asking since the beginning, as we started doing Dirac, we were working our way up. So we did Dirac Live, Dirac Bass Control, and now the last one was, when are you going to do room treatment? Room treatment will be available on all Denon and Marantz AVRs and separates that have 4 sub outs. So that means 3800 and above for Denon. And I believe, what is that, Frederick? The Cinema 50 and above for Marantz.
Correct.
So if you're curious about if your product's going to work, it's the 4 channels. So Frederick, I've been talking a lot. What do you think about the inclusion of active room treatment?
I think it's something that wasn't available on Denon and Marantz, and there was only one provider, one brand that was offering active room treatment in the consumer range. So for us, this is something unique to be able to offer this. And I see a lot of advantages. For example, I'm living in Hong Kong, and my living room is my listening space. There is a window on my left side, so there's a lot of reflection there. And there's a hallway right behind my sofa. So I'm sitting with my sofa right behind the wall. So for me, active room treatment is actually going to help mitigate all these acoustic problems, so to speak. So for me, this is a win, and I'm looking forward to try it out.
Okay, so active room treatment will be available via a future firmware update that's going to happen second half of the year. We wanted to let you know because people have been asking about it. And so just know that solution is coming, and it was the perfect time to announce that we were going to introduce that solution, because we were also introducing some new components. Now, there's also another announcement. We're always working on improving the performance of HEOS. So Frederick, what did we do for HEOS this week?
So we actually finally added, well, it's not just us, it's Qobuz initially launched their Qobuz Connect. So that means that all our Denon and Marantz amplifiers, AVRs and speakers that have HEOS built in now can be used as a HEOS, as a Qobuz endpoint. Mm-hmm. So in this case, you're using your desktop app for Qobuz, for example. You will see you can use any of our products, Denon and Marantz, that have HEOS as an endpoint. It will appear. And that also means that you're no longer streaming from your handset to, like AirPlay does, to the endpoint. You basically pull the live stream from Qobuz, and it will be playbacked on the endpoint straight away.
Yeah, so we get a lot of requests when it comes to things like HEOS, and there's a lot of different services that people keep asking us about. And this is another example of us continuing to improve the performance of HEOS. So Qobuz Connect, that is available right now. So if you have a Qobuz account and you have as Frederick mentioned, a HEOS enabled device in your home, it is already available. we're working
Yeah, just
on, and go ahead, Frederick.
yeah, there's one more thing that's very important compared to AirPlay. AirPlay is limited to 44.1. And basically, the HEOS Connect allows you to stream in high resolution directly to the endpoint. So you can do 192 24-bit.
Yep. And also you can have a download catalog too on a computer and things like that. So that's kind of nice, because I was actually sitting at my desk and I was using my computer to log on to Qobuz, look through all the albums, and there's a lot of ways to explore music in Qobuz. And then once I did that, I used Qobuz Connect from my MacBook actually to send to the to my Marantz M1 that's sitting at my desk. So that's another example. We're working on fully incorporating Qobuz into the app. So if you look at the app right now, you'll see that it has direct integration for things like Tidal and Amazon Music. We're working at actually incorporating that in as well. So two exciting things beyond the receiver that the receiver will the AVR will benefit from: Qobuz Connect and Dirac active room treatment. We will provide pricing along as we get closer, but just know that if you already have Dirac and you already have full or base control, you can upgrade to active room treatment. You basically pay the difference. So neither you can buy it all as one thing and have live room base control and active room treatment if you're a new Dirac customer, right, or if you're already a Dirac customer and you're already running it, like we're running it on our AV10 in our theater, I'll be able to now move it up to active room treatment. Cool thing about it is I don't have to rerun any of the test tones at all. I just basically reload, go to Dirac, download the new software with the license, open the old file that I made for with my target curves and all my stuff that I made with Dirac base control, right, and now I can apply that extra level of processing, which is active room treatment. So I think it's really, really cool. So those are some notable features. Can you bring up the slide with the again? So we talked about the active room treatment, and we talked about things like Qobuz, and of course, full room ready capability and built in Shirakawa, Japan. If you haven't seen, we have a video on our YouTube site that actually shows them actually just assembling the Marantz M1, and it's pretty amazing. But seeing just these AVRs, and we should do that again as that's a excuse to take producer Nick and Cam to Japan and do like a tour. I know Frederick wants to go again and show the step-by-step. Little pieces go into the factory, right, and big, beautiful processors and amplifiers come out. So it's really, 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 really nice. So build quality is exceptional. Now, if I look at the models, exterior-wise, they're very similar. So the same build quality, the porthole, you see all of the similar design elements that you would see in something between an AV10 and an AV20. They look quite similar. And in fact, if you're just looking at the front of this unit, it looks quite similar, right, to a Cinema 30, you know, because of the copper inputs, the copper screws and things like that. So cosmetically, very, very similar.
Sure.
But if I look at the inside, so this is the inside of an AV10 and an AV20.
Starts to look a little bit different.
They start looking a little bit different. The first thing, if you have never played with an AV10, the AV10's chassis is much deeper than most consumer electronics or most AVRs you're going to see on the market. And that is because of the way that they arranged the circuits inside of the board, inside of the box. They wanted to place them in their premium, most optimized location. And that resulted in an amplifier that was a little deeper. And you can actually see, if you look up at the front of the slide where the toroidal power supplies are, you can actually see that the part of the amplifier stage is actually, or the preamp stage is actually turned in a different direction. So the toroidals are actually, the big capacitors are facing the front versus facing the middle. Better way to do it, makes the chassis bigger. Now, the other thing too is what really separates them is you'll see that big collection of HDAM boards in the middle. Of course, the AV10 is going to have, it's a 15.4, right, Frederick? Just want to make sure I'm doing my math in my head.
Right. It's like,
It's a 15.4, which means there's a total of 19 HDAM boards for the processing stage in an AV10. In an AV20, it is a 13.4. So there are 17. My math right? I think that's correct. I've been driving the entire time. I can't remember. Yeah. So each surround channel or each processing channel has its own HDAM board.
Oh, okay.
And by the way, we'll talk a little bit about what HDAMs do, but that is one of the reasons why Marantz pieces sound like Marantz pieces is those HDAM boards. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get more into what the difference is between these two models. But just know,
Hey, Phil,
bigger box. Yes, sir.
you had a slide with the screws on there. Can you show that again?
Mhm.
There's something I want to mention about these different types of screws, and that's what yeah, that's the one, exactly. So you can see there's different ones with different types of washers.
Mhm.
Some of them are flat, some of them are have these little teeth in there.
Yes.
So what the Soundmaster does is they use a different particular type of screw for specific sound tuning as well. And that's
Oh
what
my.
makes them typically sound Marantz.
Mhm.
So on one side, you will have a washer which is flattened, and on the other side, you will have one with the teeth to get better grounding, better signal grounding. And that will influence the sound tuning.
Yeah, there's also a lot of little attention to detail things. Even the feet, there's different
Wow.
feet depending on the weight and the design of the product. So the feet are designed and they impact the sound because the feet are what isolate the unit from vibration. If they're too soft, the unit will wobble when bass notes go off. If they're too solid, the product will shake when the cabinet shakes. So you're trying to find this balance to make this thing, because even little things like that impact sound. So there's a lot of little things that go into the design, and the sound masters will try multiple feet until Ogata-san says, "This is the foot that I like." That's how obsessed they are with making sure that these products sound great. But same amount of care goes into both units. So whether you're looking at an AV10 or an AV20. Now, I do want to point out some common things, and then we'll talk about some of the differences, right? So the first thing, the brain. They both utilize the same brain. And this brain now utilizes a new single processor. And this single processor is actually more powerful than the chip processor that we used in the AV7706 and the AV8805. So Cam,
Gotcha.
think about it this way. You're a computer guy, right?
Yep.
NVIDIA graphics cards. Before, you used to use double graphics cards if you wanted a whole lot of power, right?
Gotcha.
But now you could probably get a single card to put into a gaming computer that is more powerful
Sure.
than the 2-card.
Sure.
And that's what's going on here. The new processor is just more powerful. And the reason why I want to bring that up is people ask me, why can't I get things like maybe Dirac, active room treatment, or some of the other capabilities on the older AVRs?
You ran out of brain power.
The brain power, So in order to do some of the things that you find in the latest Denon and Marantz AVRs, it required a bigger brain. So we are always at Marantz are trying, if we can do an upgrade to improve the performance of a product, we'll do that.
Sure.
But sometimes it's a hardware thing,
Right.
or a processing brain power thing.
Yes.
So active room treatment for subs is part of the reasons why it works so well.
Sure.
The older units only have 2, right? People, the ability to run both Odyssey and Dirac required a bigger brain.
Yeah.
So when people say, how come I wish you could add this to the older model, doesn't mean that we don't want to.
Right.
It just means that maybe the processor in the unit is not capable of doing it. Anything else you want to add to that, Frederick?
No, but there's a question that came in that's kind of related to the hardware.
Mhm.
Matt is asking, why can't we get good displays on AV receivers? You talk about the porthole, the second display.
Mhm.
Why not like an interactive, I think, like touch screen? There is a problem with screens creating noise that will affect the quality and inject noise in the circuit. So we have to be very careful what type of display that we're using
Mhm.
with these AVRs. And that's not just AVRs, it's hi-fi alike.
Mhm.
So currently you will see on the bottom part, if you pull the door down, there's a second display there that at least gives you some basic. These are not color displays. So this only that, first of all, they're very expensive to produce, but we have to find those that are inherent, that sort of will reject all the noise that do not inject into the circuits. So that's one of those puristics that Marantz is playing with, just to make sure that we're going the right direction with these AVRs.
Exactly. The smaller, less expensive AVRs may not have the door, right? But we also realize that these units are going to be connected to your television set, your display. So there's a very good, pretty comprehensive menu system. So I can hit info, I can get all the data that I would normally want to have can be displayed on screen. So we realize that a lot of times with AVRs, the AVR is going to be connected to your display. So we can inject a lot more data on the screen using the on-screen display than what we could if it was the little display across the front. We also have the ability to do web UI, a web control on all of these the receivers. So basically, if you, on the front of your receiver, if you want to know if you're a geek, there's a little status button in the front of that receiver. And I can't reach it. And if I hold that status button down for about 5 seconds, it will give me the IP address of the receiver that's on your network. Save that to your phone or to your iPad or to your computer. When you type that number back into the browser, you get the full menu system on your phone. So between the Marantz app, the on-screen menu, and the web user interface, you have a pretty good way of controlling it. So that's how we try to go give you more data without making the screen bigger. If you look at the one behind Frederick, the big Model 10 hi-fi pieces actually have it's not a touch screen, but it's a larger display on screen. But the amount of shielding that they had to put into that unit to prevent that screen from adding noise to the signal is massive. It literally lives in its own little copper cage just to make sure that the video screen does not impact the sound. And for these receivers, there's so many other ways to get data. It's just easier to use those other options. So that's a great thing. Speaking of video, there are some other differences between the two, the new things on the AVRs. All of the Marantz AVRs have a very elaborate HDMI board. If you look at that big board with the 4 fins on it, that is what is required just to do 7 8K inputs. If you try, because it's so difficult to pass that data, it's basically a matrix switch and 3 HDMI boards in order to do that. And that is quite expensive. We're still only at 40 gigabits per second because that is the maximum that is available for a switching high quality board, which is still going to give you the uncompressed video at the highest quality that any projector or TV could possibly display. There is an upgrade difference between the AV10 and the AV20. The AV20, because it's been, the AV10 was designed 2 years ago, going on 3 years ago. The AV20 is brand new. So the version of the board that is used in the AV20 is a little different. And what it gives you is the capability of doing FreeSync. for all of you gamers out there. So
Gamers.
if you look at FreeSync, so there's a functionality of HDMI 2.1 called variable refresh rate. Your computer, if you're playing at ultra high frame rates, struggle to render all the detail at the full resolution at ultra high frame rates without causing tearing and artifacts. So most people will opt to have their computer run in FreeSync, G-Sync, which is the NVIDIA version, or VRR. And what the computer will do, it will actually increase its frame rate or reduce its rendering frame rate to ensure that the video looks good. All Denon and Marantz AVRs support what's called VRR. Think of VRR as it's part of HDMI 2.1. So if I was going to buy a can of soda, that would be a can of cola that was white, and the only thing it had written on it was cola. Right? It's free to everybody. It's open source. There's no licensing. It is something that was developed by the HDMI consortium, utilizing with all of our partners, including Denon and Marantz. That is an open source. FreeSync would be like having a can of cola that said Pepsi on it, and G-Sync would be the one that says, Coke. Right? So now the new AV20 can support not only VRR but also FreeSync. We have found that it's interesting. A lot of these high-end pieces are actually find their ways into gaming systems as much as they find their ways into other products. Now, the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is HDAMs. It's funny, I sent Cam down to get an HDAM, and there's so many circuits, he grabbed a different one. But what we're going to do is talk about HDAM. So we hear the term HDAM all the time, and there's some differences between the HDAMs and an AV10 than the ones in an AV20. So before we even talk about the differences, so Frederick, can you talk a little bit about what is the benefit of an HDAM?
Yes, so HDAM literally stands for Hyperdynamic Amplifier Module, and it's the equivalent of an op-amp, an operational amplifier. So it's a part that allows you to filter or to do some buffering. It will change the sound characteristics. The problem with an off-the-shelf op-amp is that they will have only one kind of sound. You can't tweak it because it's one part, one chip. So our HDAMs are basically manufactured with different type of components. You can see, if you have a close-up shot later on, different type of parts. And if you change one part to the other, you will so you can literally fine-tune. It's like a little recipe in a box. You can add a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, a little bit of this to change how it sounds and how it filters.
Yes.
There you go. Now you can see all the little
That's a perfect
parts
one. I grabbed my recipe analogy from Frederick, right? And that's what we're talking about. An HDAM is the purpose of an HDAM is to boost a little signal into a big one, a bigger one, right? And that means they're utilized all through the product, right? Headphone amplifiers, phono preamps, preamp stages, all of those things take itty bitty signals and make them bigger. The goal of when you do that is you want that boost in signal to be instantaneous. They call that the slew rate. And if you look at the two charts, the goal of an HDAM is to make that boost instantaneous. So think of it this way: if I'm looking at a thunderclap, or a gunshot, or a hand clap, you want that to be immediate and impactful. And that's one of the things this thing does. The next thing is, as Frederick said, that's how you tune the sound. It helps you tune the sound. Because if I tune the sound when it's itty bitty, it's going to sound more natural when it's really big. So this is one of the main reasons why Marantz's sound the way they do, right? The measurements are great. If you measured a new Marantz piece compared to any new product out there, our measurements are just as good, if not better. But this is why it sounds better. And a lot of times a measurement is not going to tell you that, but when you hear it, it does. Because if you look at speakers, all speakers are rated 3 plus or minus 3 dB, 20 to 20 kilohertz. But when you sit in front of them, they all sound different, right? This is an example of that. Measurement does not really relay how this sounds. And this is something that we can tune instead of, because we're not just buying a part off the shelf that we can't. All right.
Absolutely.
So
And you can hear it in the headphones as well. If you use headphones into our headphone output, you will see that it's really, really quiet. There was a test done by some reviewers in Korea not too long ago. They were trying all sorts of devices and AVR, including AVRs, and putting the headphones in, and you always have that little hiss coming out, especially with our the 9200 Denon headphones. And with this HDAM in that circuit of the headphone amplifier, it's really, really quiet. No noise, no hiss whatsoever.
Now, as we talk about HDAMs, there's another thing I want to bring up. As Frederick mentioned, an HDAM is kind of like a recipe, right? And it, like you said, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, or if you're going to make a dish, you need some crab, and then you need some cheese or whatever, right? It all depends on, but the quality of the crab and the cheese could differ. You can have the same recipe, but one will be a little better if the ingredients that are in that recipe are better.
Was your beef dry aged?
Was your beef? Was it dry aged beef? You know, where did you get your cheese from? Is it really good cheese, or is it like that type of thing? Now, when it comes to HDAMs can come in a large variety of sizes, and a lot of times that has to do with how the unit is packaged.
Sure. And
so, for example, this is a Cinema 30 compared to a AMP20, right? Sure. And if you an AMP and AV20. So you're trying to put all that stuff that is in those two boxes in this one box, right? Which means things have to be miniaturized in order to make it fit, right? Right. And one way thing that they miniaturize would be something like the HDAMs. So if you look at this board, this is an HDAM board out of a Cinema 30. It's still the same recipe, but instead of the 4-ounce steak, the Cinema, the AV20 has a tomahawk. You get me? Right. So instead of an 80, so basically, if you count that green board, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's basically, how many channels is that? 15. Right? Yep. And that's because that is a 15-channel amplifier. Because I have more room in a preamp, instead of, I can use individual boards for that, and I can use much bigger parts because I just have more real estate. The bigger parts have more tighter tolerances. The capacitors are bigger, so they're better at releasing energy rapidly. Yep. So it's more impactful. So what you end up with is less noise because you get better channel separation, and you get more impact in your sound because I'm using individual boards. Yeah. Okay. So the next one I want to point out is, as you mentioned, that recipe thing. And this is one of those things that kind of separate the two models, because the AV10 does cost more than the AV20. And people ask, is it just the fact that it has more channels?
Nope. More than that.
It's more than that. Now, not only is it, if you look at an HDAM board, like you mentioned, it's a recipe. Yep. And the recipe between these two boards, the AV10 and the AV20, those recipes are the same. It's just the fact that because I'm building the AV10 to a higher price point, the components that I choose are actually higher as well. Right. So not only do you get more boards, I can also use tighter tolerances and higher performing parts in each board, right?
Absolutely.
And then speaking of the boards, the board is actually, instead of having, the board has to pass power, signal, ground, all this stuff, right? The board in the AV10 is actually 4 layers versus the board in the AV20. Right. Both sound great. It's just the fact that if you ask an engineer what is the best way to do it, they're going to pick the 4-layer.
Sure.
Could you hear it all the time? I don't know. But if I'm going to build it the right way, and I have the budget for it,
yes,
I'm going to use
more separation.
I'm going to use the better board to ensure better separation. And then last but not least,
don't get me wrong, it was I mean, for part wise, like I don't remember what the count was. Maybe it was in one of these slides, but from the AV10 to the AV20, it was almost 100 different.
There's a lot more parts.
Right?
There's a huge amount of parts. The best way to think of it is because we build all these products, because we build these models in our facility, right? If the sound master, we give them a price point, they give the Marantz team a price point, they can bespoke every HDAM board. So the HDAM 3 board that's in an AV10 is different than maybe an HDAM 3 board that will be found in something like a Model 10 behind Frederick, because we talk about the fact that I can tune it. So it becomes, what is the budget for the product?
Right.
How many do I have to use? And what's the sound I'm trying to get? And so HDAM boards are not HDAM boards are the same. Oh, and the last thing is if you'll see HDAM 2 and HDAM 3, that's not a better board. It's just one is for this application, and the other one is for that application.
Different application.
Exactly. All right. So you'll see HDAM boards in a huge amount of different sizes and different combinations,
Right.
but just know that this is an example of something that we do that no one else does. And that's one of the reasons why Marantz products literally have more parts in them than any comparable receiver or AVR or AV processor from any manufacturer. They're using 1 or 2 parts.
Right.
We're using hundreds on a board.
Right.
So it really makes a difference. And then the last thing, we were talking about the chassis. The chassis on the AV10, as we mentioned, is deeper. It's a little because of the layout inside. It's also a 3-layer. So and that this leads to more rigidity, and also better isolation of noise. The bigger chassis is more expensive. So when you factor the bigger chassis, the bigger chassis, the step up in components, because you have the range and the extra channels. That is why an AV10 costs more than an AV20. So let's answer some questions here as we go along.
Yeah.
All right.
How are you looking on them?
So it looks like Matt's I think Matt likes the trick about holding down the status button. And by the way, most of our AVRs that you have purchased in the past, 5-6 years, have a web UI.
Nice.
So the new models have the status button. The older models, you may have to go into the menu system. So if I bring up the receiver, if I go into the menu system of this AVR, come on up, and I go down to general, right? And then is it general? Yeah, I think it's general. And I go all the way down to information. Is it information or? Oh, you know what? I need to go to network. This has been a long day. So let me go up here to network.
It's been
okay. I go to network. I go to information here. It gives me, I can find the IP address. There's no IP address here because we're not connected.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, first of all, we're not connected to anything.
We're not connected to anything. The other way you could do that, by the way, is on my phone, I have one of those Wi-Fi or network scrubbers. So when I'm on a network, I can see all the devices on the IP, on the network. So if I can't get to the receiver and the status button doesn't work, I can open my phone. If I'm upstairs in a different room, literally, look at all the stuff, and the Marantz product will identify itself, and I know it's 192.168.0.47.
Right.
And then I just type that into my browser. Yep. So if you can't hit the status button, you can also grab it utilizing either the information menu here or some sort of other way that you can see all the devices on the network. So Superfly was asking, well, how much does Dirac active room treatment cost? The final pricing, has not really been announced yet. But I will make sure that I let you know. As we get closer, we will let you know. It should be quite reasonable, especially if you've already bought. In order to use active room treatment, you need to have at least Dirac Live Limited. You need to have base control, and in order to use active room treatment. Active room treatment works on the bottom end, the base in your room. I think it's about 500 hertz and down, which is where most of the problems are in a room. So instead of you putting bass traps and all of that stuff, the way active room treatment uses is it uses all the other speakers in your room to assist with fixing a problem with your left front. So if your left front has a problem with like a dip or null, the other speakers will basically help it out.
Got it.
And I think that's the best way to explain it. But it's more of a bass thing. So you can't just buy active room treatment. You got to buy at least a version of live, and bass control and ART.
Because it all works together.
It all works together. Okay. And we will let you know. As we get closer, Cam and I will actually go walk through the whole process. So the second this sucker becomes available, you'll be able to jump on YouTube. I'm giving producer Nick another job to do. And you'll be able to watch the video the day that it comes out, and you can just follow your way through the process. How do I make sure my receiver is updated to the proper firmware? How do I get a license? How do I load my existing file if I don't? And then how do I use active room treatment, and what's the before and after of applying that? So we're going to make sure that we actually do that as well. Yeah, I believe it's
also asking.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Big Jack was asking if there's going to be a beta tester sign up for Dirac ART. I think they're looking at a public beta, right?
Yeah, I think they are. As we get closer, we will let you know. Superfly, I think it's 500. I know it's not above 2K. I know it's more in the base range of it, but I can't remember off the top of my head because it doesn't work yet. I haven't used it yet on this unit. We had a test unit. We actually tested this, by the way. Frederick and I were there. They did a demo in this in Japan, 2 years ago, while they were working through the process, and it made a massive difference. So, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But we'll make sure we have another video that Nick is going to be putting up from the engineers at Dirac. That should be up probably on tomorrow. They'll walk through and provide a lot more detail on that. So if you want to know more details about that, so keep checking out our YouTube channel. We actually have several kind of cool videos coming in the next week or so, because guess what? We're not done with announcements. All right. So the next thing is let's talk a little bit now about the technical details of the amplifier, right? Oh, sorry. Where am I doing? Is that me? Oh, let me come back off. Back. Oh, sorry. I am running my PowerPoint through the AVR so I can actually show you the menu system. Back. There we go. So let's talk a little about the AMP20. AMP20 is a 12-channel by 200 amplifier. So think of this guy literally as 6 stereo amplifiers in the same chassis. And I will actually show you that. So literally, if you look at them, it's basically 6 independent amplifiers in the same chassis, which makes it, the power delivery is absolutely outstanding. One of the things about it is we mentioned that it's 200 watts per channel into 8 ohms, 400 watts into 4 ohms if you do what's called BTL. Basically take 2 of the channels and bridge them together. The product actually has I think it's 100% power guarantee for at least 5 channels. I will tell you that is quite conservative. In our theater, we have been using AMP10s, which is basically the same amplifier modules, and we used 2 of them, and it literally replaced 7 amplifiers with 2.
Yeah.
So, and the biggest challenge we have is they draw so much current that we can actually pop either the power conditioner or the circuit in the room, because we were running just a single 20 amp when we got started. So tons and tons of power. Quality components, if you look at an AV10, an AMP10 and a AMP20, very similar. When it comes to the toroidal power supplies, preamp stages, connections, inputs, the meters, the cosmetics, very, very similar between the 2 models. And the main goal is, these amplifier modules are what really separate this unit from the other units out there.
Thought you were saying Simplify.
Simplify. Marine over here. Simplify.
Simplify. Hoorah.
Hoorah. Hoorah. Okay. So
Wrong live stream. Sorry.
We'll do military makeover pretty soon, which is coming up.
Veterans Day.
Yeah. So with
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day, Veterans Day. So these are actually the inside of the two units. And as you look, just like the AV10, the AMP10's chassis is bigger. And that is the same thing with placement. That is the optimal way to place the components. So not only does it have more amp modules in it, more stereo amp modules in it, it's also the rearrangement of the components. The components are similar, like the toroidal and everything else, but how those components are arranged in the chassis are different. All right. The chassis is multi-layered, like we talked about on the other one, versus, so the same thing, 2-layer versus 3-layer and things like that. So the big thing with an AMP10, anybody versus 4-layer, 3-layer versus 4-layer. Okay. So the chassis, so there is some differences there in cosmetics. The big thing is like, they even have HDAMs. These utilize a new version of an HDAM called an SA2. This is part of the input stage of the amplifier. This is what's in the input stage of the amplifier. And you got to have one of those for every single channel of the input stage. Okay. So this is an example of them. So of course the AMP10 has more HDAM blocks because it has more channels, right? The big thing that makes these products unique is this here. And this is a version of, this one's ice. Which one is this one, Frederick? I forget. Is it Ice Power? No. Is it Ice Power?
It's Ice Power, yeah. So it's a collaboration we did with them, and you can see on the left, that's how the standard module looks like. We did the same thing with the recipe story. We took the best parts. We know what the recipe should be like, but we didn't use our own parts to recreate that particular Ice Power module so that we can get the sound to what it needs to be.
Exactly. So we took their recipe, and most people would just buy an Ice Power ice module. We didn't do that. We licensed the recipe, added some upgrades to the recipe. So say you were a master chef working at a restaurant, and another master chef had a really good carbonara recipe for pasta. You took that recipe and you said, I can make it a little better, right? By upgrading the ingredients and things like that. So these boards are built by us in our factory for our products.
Got it.
The reason why I want to bring this up, and this is the number one question we get, so I might as well address it now. Why does the AV10 have 13 channels, but the AMP10 has 12 channels? That is because these are stereo modules. We don't make a mono module for there. So in order to ensure economy of scale, we make one module, stereo module, high quality all the time. And that helps with packaging. So that means 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, or 16. So we had to choose between, do we make a 12-channel amplifier or a 14-channel amplifier? And if you look at it, the most popular configurations are 5.1.4, 7.1.4. That's closer to 11. Right. So that is why we did that. If you need more channels, remember the quality of the amplifiers of these two big these two amplifiers are very similar. So there's going to be many people who are going to buy an AV20 and an AMP10 if they need a higher channel count. And we'll show you some of those configurations after. So the reason why for some reason surround sound is even, it's odd, 7.1, 5.1, 9.1, right? But these are stereo blocks, so that meant 2, 4. Does that make sense?
I didn't know that.
Okay, okay. All right, because people ask me that all the time. Why did you make a 12 and and a 13? It's like, well, it would have been either it would have been a 14,
Right.
and more likely they just looked at it. They did a they talked to customers, they talked to end users, and they figured between the two, either a 12 channel or 14 channel, the 12 channel made the most sense.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So we've already talked about these amplifier modules and things like that. And we also talked about, if you bring up the slide, there is some differences between the chassis, bigger, more stronger, better built, basically box for these units, right? So since we were talking about configurations, let me show you some of the configurations that you can actually do. So there's multiple ways you can use this amplifier, right? Depending on the speaker that you have. So maybe you have a regular pair of speakers. You only want to use 2 inputs on it. Well, you can run a AMP20 as 12 channels or 16 channels, right? Then if I have biamp, I could take 2 of the channels and bridge them together. And I can run, 8 speakers or 6 speakers. If I had a speaker and I turn it around, sometimes the speaker only has 2 connections. That is, I'm going to either run it in traditional 200 watts, or I'm going to do what's called BTL. And what BTL does is it takes that bridge tied load, right? What it does, it takes that one stereo amplifier module, and instead of it being left, channel 1 and channel 2, think of it as the top of the sine wave and the bottom of the sine wave. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So now this one piece is acting as, instead of 2 independent channels, one big channel. One part doing the top. It's almost like if you were sawing. You pull, I push. You get a lot more power. That's 400 watts per channel. The other option would be the biamp it. So if you have a speaker that has 4 terminals, you could run 2 channels from an AMP10 or a AMP20 to those terminals. Now, moving on from there, so there's a lot of things you can do. So, for example, I love the Model 10. Frederick has like one behind him. A Model 10 would be, say you had a hi-fi system, and your main thing is hi-fi. That's what you want, and you want to keep everything isolated. You could take the Model 10, you can completely isolate it, plug your turntable, your CD player, your link, everything into that Model 10, and connect it to your 801 signatures, and have a spectacular hi-fi system. But in many people, they don't have the space for both the hi-fi system and the surround sound system. That room is the same room.
Right.
Then you can do an AV10, and then maybe an AMP10 or an AV20 or an AMP20, depending on what you need for channels. Now your mains are still being driven by your Model 10. There's a switch on your Model 10 to turn it into just a power amp. It's called power amp mode. Bypasses everything. Now it's a power amp, right?
Right.
Then you use the AMP10 or the AMP20 to run all of the channels. So in that scenario, you end up with 14 channels, right?
Right.
And then your AV10 is the brain that deals with all of your video. So say all your hi-fi connections for stereo would go into the Model 10. All of your video, PlayStation, Xbox, Blu-ray player, Kaleidoscape would plug into your AV10 or your AV20, right? Here's some examples. So say this is an AV20 AMP20 combination. So I have enough power to do 7.1.4, all of the channels. Now, hey, Frederick, let me ask you a question. Somebody asked me, well, I have that one leftover channel. What can I do with it? So what would you do with it?
Additional center, maybe?
There you go. So what a lot of times people can do is I would take that additional channel that I have, I would set it to bridge tied load and run more power to my center channel. Because your center channel, because a large amount of dialogue and everything comes out, allows you to get a bigger center channel. Okay. The other option is TVs are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So if you put a center channel below the TV, the voice is coming from here, the sound is coming from way down here. So what you could do is you could take the amplifier, and you could use one for a center channel that's powering the top, and one that's powering the bottom. And you could use like an XLR-Y for that. And then when you run the Odyssey or you run any Dirac, it's going to take those two speakers and treat them as one thing, right?
Yeah.
And what you end up with is, because you have a speaker above and below the center channel, the large screen, now the voice will appear in the middle of that 100-inch screen. So if you get a 85-inch, 90-something inch, 100-inch screen, you're not going to put a center channel behind a 100-inch flat panel television, but you still want the voice to come from there. So that's a way of utilizing that channel right now.
That's slick.
So that's one thing that I could actually, that you could actually utilize it for. So that is another. The other thing that you can do is, if you had a passive subwoofer, you could use it for one of the 4 subs in a room, because it's 200 watts. It's an extra 200 watts to drive an extra subwoofer, maybe an in-wall or something like that. You know, so there's ways to use that extra channel. But I was thinking about the center channel thing. The dual centers would be how I would actually utilize
a hot
it.
ticket right there.
Okay, so if you look at this, you can do a 7.1.4. In my house, remember I mentioned I have a 5.1.4 in my house. Right now, I am using a AV10 and an AMP10. Absolute overkill in my house, right? But I do want to drive my large floor standers. I used to have, they're gone now, but I used to have a pair of big Wilsons and a big Wilson center channel, power hungry, and I wanted to drive those. Well, what I could do there is I can BTL. I have enough channels that I can run 400 to the left, 400 to the center, 400 to the right, and still be able to send 200 watts per channel to every other speaker in the house. So if I'm using it for hi-fi, and I know that I'm getting 400 watts per channel to drive my demanding Bowers 801s if I want to do that, right?
Yep.
The other option would be, as I mentioned, you can use an AMP10 with a AV20. And now you have all these extra channels. What can you do? Well, if I wanted to now, I could run the same thing I just talked about, right? For BTL, the left, right, center, do the 7.6, and off that amplifier if I wanted to. I could BTL 5 of the channels if I wanted, so there's a lot of combinations here,
Right.
And then the last one would be something like, maybe you want to do a 5.1.4 and BTL all 5. And you could even run a second zone off of that. Because remember, the receiver has a second zone.
Right. Yep.
So now you can say, okay, well, I want to run 400 watts by 5, 200 watts by 4, and still send 200 watts per channel, which is the same quality or better than something like a Model 30 to my second zone to run a really high-end set of speakers.
Yep.
Tons and tons and tons of combinations here that you could actually do. So, and that's just a couple of ideas that I had. I'm sure if you think about it, there's lots of other applications that that you just explained.
I can actually come up with another one, Phil.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of you may be familiar with Bowers & Wilkins Nautilus speaker. That's 4 speakers. So you need 4 amplifiers per speaker.
Channel.
So 8 altogether, 8 channels, right? So we actually connected the AMP10 directly to the Nautilus, and it sounds phenomenal.
Oh yeah, so
and technically speaking, we could do the same with the AV20 because it's the same amount of power.
Yeah. You can, because 16 channels, you could BTL it into 400 by 8, which will run a pair of Nautiluses off of one box. Now, of course, if you're spending $100,000 on Nautiluses, come find me. I think you need to upgrade a little bit more to one amplifier, but we just did it to show that you could actually do it. Okay, so that's a good thing. All right, so I mean, really cool pieces. That I am really excited about. And if you look at these models, the goal of these models is to deliver the highest quality possible. And but for someone who does not need, like as I said, the number of channels, or maybe they can the things such as the depth of an AV10 and AMP10 may be too much for them. And for me, I mean, I'm probably gonna swap because I have loaners. Don't tell anybody, but I'm gonna swap my AV10 AMP10 for this stack because it does everything I need, and I'm not and no more than what I need. So
Right.
this is a great combination. So as I mentioned, the units are going to retail for $6,000. So $6,000 for this unit and $6,000 for that unit. So this is right now the next step after you get past the Cinema 30. We go into these units. All right. So any other questions or anything else you'd like to talk about, Cam?
Not me.
Okay.
There was one question from Polyester Pimp. He's asking, why did the namers of the stack US rename it from HDAM to SA2? So I think it's a misconception.
Mhm.
They're all called HDAM, but we have SA1, SA2, SA3, SA2 brush up. They're all different variations of the same kind of HDAM, but used in different circuits, different parts of the...
Exactly. The recipe for an HDAM SA2 is a different recipe than an HDAM SA3. The recipe on an HDAM SA2 brush up is almost like is a little different than the SA2. So that's one of those things. The other thing that's interesting is we look at the HDAM SA3, and it says that both the AV10 and the AMP and the AV10 and the AV20 have an SA3, but the components are a little different. So maybe it should be like SA3 enhanced or
0.1
or SA3
enhanced,
exactly, because the recipe is the same.
Right.
The ingredients are better. The analogy I always use with Cam is we go to this fancy Mexican restaurant called Javier's.
Check them out, y'all. If I ain't
Yes.
been there.
But
not what do you call that? Not sponsored.
Not sponsored. Not sponsored. We're not sponsored by Javier's. But Javier's makes some of the best seafood. It's a Mexican restaurant.
But if you do,
And normally Mexican restaurants, the best ones are the really good mom and pop, inexpensive little guys, right?
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to spend a lot of money on Mexican food when I get some spectacular enchiladas at a local hole in the wall for $12, right?
Yeah. We're in San Diego County.
San Diego County. Yeah, we're in San Diego. Mexican food is serious here. But you go to Javier's and their enchiladas are $50 for seafood enchiladas. And you go, why would anybody spend $50 for enchiladas when you can go to another Mexican restaurant and get the same seafood enchiladas
No, you can't.
for you can't, but they sound the same on the menu.
They sound the same.
$25 for those, $50 for these. But then you realize, oh, the lobster is grilled lobster. It's not out of a can. The shrimp is grilled shrimp, like freshly grilled, fresh,
velvety, smooth sauce on it. They source their lobster from a certain spot that it comes really sweet, the sweetest lobster you can ever get. Their crab, it's a special crab that they get. Their ingredients are just better than the spot that you get somewhere else. So
exactly, but it's still the same thing. It's a tortilla. It's lobster, crab, shrimp, some cheese, and some guacamole, and you go, how much better is it going to be? But when you use better ingredients, you get better better performance. So we should actually have a What'd you say?
Must be in the salt. You got like sea salt, Himalayan salt, fleur de sel, whatever, all different kinds of salt.
They
right?
go past the Himalayas for the salt.
Yeah. So we're gonna. So these are HDAM3 Javier's.
Right there you go. There you go.
Yeah. So let's look at some more questions. It's so funny.
Yes.
One of the
Superfly
guys
saying, "You're making me hungry." I'm ready for breakfast.
Like, man,
by the
y'all
way.
are making me hungry on your live stream.
Yeah.
So sorry,
Paul,
y'all.
Yeah. So Paul mentioned, the difference between the prices between the two, right now, it's depends on the channels. If you're not going to use all the channels of the AV10 and you don't think you're going to be using all the channels of the AV10, the AMP10, take the $2,000, upgrade your subwoofer, upgrade your cabling, upgrade your screen, use it for that. If you think in the future that you may want, Cam's a big guy like me. Our philosophy is buy once, cry once.
Buy once, cry once.
If I think that I'm going to possibly in the future ever
I might
want to upgrade, then that may be a good reason to step up
Sure.
to an AV10 and an AMP10.
Yep.
You may not be using it now, but I might. And
Might.
I just want to make sure that I never box myself in. So that's one of those things. So Sam was asking why no 7.1 input. If I could turn this guy around, the issue that we always have with these amplifiers is real estate, right? So if I can find, I'm looking to see if I have a shot of the back.
See if there's a photo
of the back.
See if we got an image for you.
I know, I'm looking for the back of this thing. The issue with these units is always real estate. So if you look at these units, there's, as we add more processing, there was more room when it was a 7.1.2, but then 7.1.4, 7.1.6, 9.1.6, 9.4.6, we're starting to run out of places to put things.
Yeah.
I will say that if you look at the AV20, because it has less processing channels in it, there was a little bit more room. And if you look over on the AV20, which is the top right unit, you will see in the upper right side of that thing, it actually has analog video inputs. So if I couldn't turn it, I would turn around, but if I do that, we'll lose our video.
Yeah.
But if I turn around, so there was enough room. So the AV20 actually has analog video inputs. When it comes to the 7.1 input, really cool. But most of the time these days, most of the sources can pass full res or multi-channel high res via HDMI. And there are some products, like I have a big high-end Panasonic player that has 7.1 outputs on it. But by the time the D-Day converter in that Panasonic is not going to be at the same level as this. So a lot of times it's better for the disc player to just be the reader of things and do all of your digital in here. So that seems to be why you're gonna do this. All right. So what's the next one? Superfly says, "Don't do this to me."
Oh no.
He's looking at the A1H. You know what? Let's talk about that. This is actually a good point.
What we got?
The A1H is an absolute animal. So if you're trying to package it in a single
single box unit,
single box
solution,
you know, the A1H is the A1H, which is the competitor to the AV10, and the A10H, which is the comparable Denon piece to the AV20, would be the way to go if you're limited in space.
You don't have room for separates, and you need an all-in-one. That is
exactly. And so if you look at it, Denon always. Denon delivers outstanding. We always say Denon. Think of Denon and Marantz like Audi and Porsche, right? Both of them you would aspire to own.
Cousins.
But the Marantz always lives at a little bit higher. The engineers are given a little more money to apply. So if you look at them on paper, depending, they may both be 7.1 or 9.1 or 11.1 or 13.4, but the components that are in the Marantz are a little higher, which is why the Marantz is always, as we go up the lineup, a little bit above, right? Denon said, we want to build the ultimate single box solution. And that piece is spectacular. We actually have two systems in our theater. One of them runs on an AV10 AMP10 combo, and the other one is a Bowers 700 series 9.1.6 that runs on the A1H, and everybody is blown away by it. Marantz said, well, if that piece is already, I can't put any more in a box. Right? So because I can't put any more in a box, the next logical thing after the single box is the separates. To separate it. So when we get to a certain point, 6800, Cinema 30, but after that, Denon decided to stay with single box AV receivers, and then Marantz is splitting themselves into AV separates.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There's also the sound signature differences, right?
Yeah,
between
this is-
Denon and Marantz.
Absolutely.
oh yeah, that's an interesting
That's something
thing.
we can maybe mention. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I always use the analogy of a sound engineer that's sitting in a studio and wants to hear all the clear details, the nice instrumentation, the positioning and everything, and the dynamics. This is the Denon sound signature. You're the engineer in the studio. Whereas Marantz, you are literally the person who's sitting inside a concert hall or a jazz bar or something, and you hear the band playing in front of you. The live kind of feel. So that's different approach in terms of how sound is projected and how the sound is tuned for Denon or Marantz.
Yeah, it's almost like a car. If you
Actually,
drive
I like the way you worded that.
Yeah,
Kinda.
exactly.
This is recorded, right? So I can write that down later and repeat it
Exactly.
myself later.
exactly, and that's the way it is. There is no right or wrong. If you jump in a
yeah.
911 Porsche and you drive it, it's a beautiful car to drive. But then if you jump in a Ferrari and you drive it, it's a beautiful car to drive. They just sound different. There's a different characteristic of it.
Yep.
Both of them are coveted,
Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
So there is no right or wrong. It's just what you like.
Yep.
And we've actually
It's a
done
matter
that
of
demo.
taste.
matter
Matter of taste. Where we've actually done that. Take a Cinema 30
Yep.
and a 6800, and we play them both.
Mhm.
And people don't. They say they both sound great, but they sound different.
Yeah, that's the point of having two different brands.
Exactly. If everything sounded the same, they'd be one audio brand. Period.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
if you look at all audio brands, they all have their own
Yes.
sonic signature.
Yeah.
And we have found that people tend to, who can afford it, tend to gravitate towards the sound of a Marantz. And if you look at it between Marantz and Denon, we have a pretty large chunk of the market share. So a lot of people around the world actually agree that those are the two. They love the sound of those two products.
Yep.
Yeah. So Sam was asking about an AV30. What's an AV30? I've never heard of that before. We don't comment on anything. I like my job. I love doing live streams with
Man,
you.
you're trying to get people
So
fired off
today-
of the live stream.
Today, I do comment on anything or any future
Thought we
plans
was all friends
because
here.
we have plenty of time to talk about the beautiful AV20, right? And if anything new comes out, just make sure that you stick by, you show up at our live streams because you never know, right? So, but right now, this is the most amazing product that we offer as a separate, and it now brings the price point and capabilities down into the range of other people. So cannot comment on future plans or products. All right. So good questions. Good questions. Anything else you'd like to cover today, Frederick, before we let these guys go?
No, I think we pretty much covered. I'm trying to go through the log to see if any question wasn't answered, but it's pretty much there.
Okay.
Yay.
Beta testing, yeah, we'll come up with that. We'll let you know when that's happening.
Nice. We about to give y'all 10 minutes of your day back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So somebody was talking about, actually, Matt, glad you mentioned PlayStation. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, y'all want to go 10 minutes on PlayStation real quick? No, just kidding. Don't get me started on PlayStation. We'll turn this into a gaming channel real quick, like.
So let me see here. It says, and you guys save consumer money because you only pronounce. Yeah, that's actually a good comment. So Superfly is talking about the HDMI boards. One thing that we try to do is economy of scale, right? So we have a recipe for an HDAM board. It's just which capacitors you load into the machine that builds the boards, right?
Mhm.
We try to utilize the same video boards across all platforms. We try to utilize the same Helios board across all platforms. So whether you're buying a Cinema 50 Marantz piece or a Model 10, that Helios board is similar. So the economy of scale is one of the reasons why, number one, we can guarantee performance.
Yes.
Because we build one board, we test it to the end of its life to make sure the HDMI works right, or the wireless music works right, and then we use that board across all platforms, right? The reason why I challenge you to try to find another amplifier that's built like an AMP10 or an AV10, because most people are not vertically integrated manufacturers.
Right.
They will buy pieces from other places and maybe assemble them in their factory. Our pieces, itty bitty parts go in and big amplifiers come out. So because we don't have to rely as much on third-party vendors for boards and stuff. We can build every board in-house. That allows us to build at a level of performance that most people can't do it. And then by doing it modularly, it just makes it much easier to build high-end products. You make one HDAM board and you put 17 in.
Yep.
Right. So that's just the more efficient way of doing things. Speaking of features, real grilling, 1440p supported when? That is a good question. I have mentioned that Cam is a gamer, so we have people who are interested in 1440. So we've mentioned that to the engineering team, and they're looking at at all that they always ask how many people are going to use it and if it's possible. To them, you think about it, 16 by 9, 1080p, or 3840 by 2160 displays are what the majority of these products plug into. If I run 1440 on a 1080 by 1920 display, I have to scale it down, which is going to add lag. If I play 1440 on a 3840 by 2160 display, I have to upscale it, which adds lag. So unless I have a native display that is 1440, and if I don't running it on a non-1440 display will add lag, which is going to impact the gaming experience.
Right.
So until there's a lot of consumer displays that natively support 1440, it's become a little harder. Now that's starting to change, like DOP projectors, they now can do 1440 at 240 hertz at like 8 milliseconds.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, well, there's a lot of these gaming projectors are doing that now, but a lot of people are hooking these up to still TVs, and I guess TVs aren't doing that right now. Is that what the issue is?
Yeah, TVs are they're trying to look at we always weigh demand, right? And also it's also about the board. How does the board switch? So the question is there a board that can switch? Can we do a 7 input, 3 output, 8K board that does 4K 120 and 1440 at this?
Gotcha.
Does that board exist, and is it possible?
Gotcha.
So that's one of those things that we have to talk about. And then of course, Superfly had mentioned the more dual speaker presets. So we have dual speaker presets too, and that has been, I will tell you, Superfly, a common request to have more than 2 speaker presets.
Oh yeah.
But remember, if you have one of those speaker presets set to Dirac, you can have 3 filters, which is basically 3 presets on that one. But that is one of those things that I think would be great. And then what else say here?
There's something we can mention also. You can have a total of 6 slots if you're using Dirac, 3 in each speaker preset, right? If you're not using the Odyssey.
Exactly.
So it's quite flexible.
Yeah. And then actually, you know what, Matt? Just from these conversations from Polyester, Pimp, and Matt, that actually gives me some ideas on some live streams we should do. I was thinking about doing one on gaming, optimizing gaming, because everybody asks, how much is the input lag affected? So I have testing equipment. We can actually test the input lag directly from the tester to the display, and then we can also show you what happens when you put the receiver into its audio low latency modes, and how does it impact your latency.
Yeah, what's that thing you have? You have a Bond.
I have the new 4K Leo Bonar. One that does 4K 120, 8K 60, and
you can test that stuff.
I can test all that stuff. So that was one that we should do, and then the other one we should do one on gaming. Optimizing your system for gaming and cabling and all Xbox, PlayStation, all of that stuff, right? And then the other one that Matt brought up, we should do one on high res audio. Sure. So I think that is a great way. How do you access it? What's the best file formats? What music services you can get it from? He mentioned using a PlayStation 5 to access that. You know, we could talk about where do you get
PS5 to access what?
high-res content.
Oh, never tried that. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
You know, and then also we could talk about, you know, where do you get multi-channel content? So that's either Apple TV. So a lot of services like Tidal and other services are now starting to support immersive audio formats, and that would be another great one.
Nice.
So we can do one on high res. Put that down, Nick, as a producer, Nick, as a topic.
He's
typing
as we
I'm
go.
typing something around. So one is high res and multi-channel audio playback, right?
Sure.
Services, techniques and applications. And the other one is something like optimizing gaming. And we can also talk about, I did a whole thing on HDMI 2.2 with Gene from Audioholics. And I know that people want to kind of get into that one too.
2.2.
2.2, display port.
We were just at 2.1.
All of that stuff. So I think that would be another one. All right. So great topics to talk about. All right. And then adding Odyssey and Dirac, you're increasing the price. Well, the way it works is, so that's a good point. So Superfly. So he was asking, you know, when it comes to Odyssey, we cover the licensing for Odyssey. We always have. And that is because there, if you really, really know what you're doing and you have a real-time analyzer and a microphone and all that stuff, you can really dial that in, but the average customer does not. So it goes back to economy of scale. So the basic Odyssey that's built into the AVRs, because we put that in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of AVRs, the costs leveraged across all those AVRs are quite small, right? Because we use that format in everything. Now, if we use Dirac makes their living by licensing.
Sure.
And we would have to purchase licenses for every single product. And if we did that, that would raise the product pricing. So giving you the programmed capability to purchase the license doesn't increase the price of the unit.
No.
If we included the license as part of the purchase price, then the price of the unit would go up. All right. So we're going to talk about that more when we do a video along the way. All right.
Yeah. So to be clear, we're not increasing the price of anything for Dirac. That's an optional thing. You can go out to buy if you wanted to do that.
Exactly.
What we're including in these prices is Odyssey.
Yeah.
Odyssey is included, has been included.
Yeah.
That's just the price that comes included for the price of for the units.
Yeah.
Dirac is optional. You can go ahead and spend that money if you wanted to.
Yeah. So the best way to think of it like a computer. If I had a Mac computer, it includes Final Cut, it includes this, it includes Keynote and everything else. Right. That's included, right? But it's powerful enough, and if you want to download the Windows Office,
right,
you can run that. You know, and that's how this is. Sure. The Mac comes with the Apple software programs on it, but if you want to buy the Mac stuff, go right ahead. But if I include
the Windows stuff.
The Windows stuff, if I wanted to include the Windows stuff in this Mac, I would raise the price.
Yeah, it would drive the price up.
So the unit will run the program. We made sure the unit runs the program. Right. You just have to decide if you want to purchase the program. Right. Great questions. All right. So as we go along, we're going to be doing a lot more of these along the way. I believe the next one we haven't scheduled yet. We're going to be putting up a video in the next day or so with the schedule for the next 2 months. So there's going to be some other cool ones, and I suggest you hang out and spend time. We're going to have some special guests and some other things that I think are going to be really good. And then last but not least, Nick is going to be putting up a couple of additional videos this week and the next few days. So stand by and check those videos out. And make sure that if you're not subscribed to our channel, you do. Make sure that you put the notification on to make sure that you don't miss our live streams, and tell your friends to come and hang out with us as well. All right. So Frederick, thank you for coming again and spending time with us. Okay. And Cam, thank you very much. Now we can go home and go to sleep because it's been a long day. And of course, thank you, producer Nick. So take care, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.